Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Astrokit here, and today we're talking about Mercury in retrograde. And in this video, we're talking about the top 5 ways this retrograde impacts your life. So to find out the impact and influence of this retrograde, stick around to the end and make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel if you are new. And also at the end, there is a special fun fact and question of the day. So stick around for that and we'll get into the top 5 impacts now. So what are the important dates to remember for this retrograde? When does it start? When does it end? What do we put in our calendars? And I'll put the dates on the screen right now. And by the way, this is using tropical astrology, tracking the tropical dates of this event, and it's happening in tropical Libra. So Mercury retrograde officially starts Monday, September 27th, and then it ends October 18th. So it lasts about 3 weeks, and the pre-shadow phase started on September 6th, and the post-shadow phase ends on November 3rd. So with pre-shadow and post-shadow, the water's still murky. So even though Mercury retrograde officially starts on a certain day, it ends on a certain day, it's technically 3 weeks, you can still feel it kind of happening for about 6 weeks. And these are the main dates that matter when it comes to this retrograde phase. And check the house in your chart that you have Libra. Whatever house you have Libra is where you're going to feel this retrograde and feel the themes of that house really be present in your life. And on Patreon, we have specific predictions for your sign and for your house based on retrograde and how it affects you based on your specific chart. So I'll link Patreon down below if you guys want to see your specific prediction. But generally speaking, the house you have Libra is where you can feel this retrograde. So what exactly is Mercury retrograde? Now, if this isn't your first rodeo, if you already know about retrograde, you could probably just skip to the other portion of this video, to the 5 impacts. But if you're a little bit new, if you want to recap a refresher of what it is, then here it is in this timestamp. So basically, Mercury retrograde, it's an event that happens every single year, 3 times a year. So usually in the beginning chunk of the year it happens, in the middle, and towards the end it happens. So this is the last Mercury retrograde of 2021. And Mercury goes retrograde for about 3 weeks each time. So 3 times a year for 3 weeks each. It happens every year. That's essentially the timeline of Mercury retrograde. But what exactly is it? So Mercury is a fast-moving planet, and so during retrograde it starts to move slowly. And it doesn't really move backwards where you might think it does move backwards because retrograde, but it's actually just moving slowly. So since Mercury is moving slowly, then the Mercury kind of themes in our lives that we see every single day also move slowly. That's why it has that infamous reputation of things not going right, is because in our everyday lives we need Mercury, we do Mercury related things, and Mercury retrograde kind of slows things down, makes things not work well logistically. Things can be disharmonious, things can be unaligned, things just kind of go wrong since Mercury is not in its direct state. And what exactly is Mercury related things? So speaking, writing, talking, driving, travel, messages, media. Basically everything we do every single day kind of relates back to Mercury. Hence why it's a time period where things just don't really go well. There's a lot of logistical mishaps. And so since Mercury represents our mind, our intellect, our ability to pay attention and form logical thoughts, it's a time where we have to think more deeply. We have to pay closer attention. We have to review things, reassess things, especially those Mercury things in our lives. Basically using our mind and intellect and logic to discern things better. So now let's just get into the top 5 impacts and how this influences your life. So number 1, discernment. So discernment, I feel like, is the biggest key word with this retrograde in the sign of Libra. And something I feel like that doesn't get talked about too much with Libra and the archetype of Libra is that Libra is a cerebral sign. It deals with logic, it deals with problem solving, it deals with rational thought. And so granted that, and granted Libra being the scales and this theme of balance comes up, I feel like during retrograde it has a lot to do with discerning what's good for us, discerning what is logical, discerning just what is productive for our lives. I feel like this period of retrograde is good for like decluttering, revision, reassessing things, using logic, discernment, using the scales, so to speak, to kind of bring balance to our lives is a huge theme for this retrograde. And that brings us into the second way that this retrograde impacts your life, and that is through mental health. So since it is Mercury we're talking about here, Mercury rules the mind. And so you might become more aware of your thought patterns, more aware of how you deal with things mentally, how do you think things through. And this topic of mindfulness really comes through, and you might be doing more mindful activities, working on mindful activities, doing things like journaling, things that kind of help your mental health or make you a more productive person mentally. We have this urge to reassess and rethink, how do we handle our problems? How do we handle stress? We're rethinking our routine. How do we handle our daily lives, especially from a mental and psychological perspective? Number 3, the third way that this impacts your life is relationships. So as most of us already know, Libra is the sign notoriously known to be about relationships. And so what I will highlight with this retrograde is that, of course, it's not just about romantic relationships. It deals a lot with like platonic relationships, like your coworkers, your peers, people around you, and even just like your associates or colleagues, and people that might not be a huge like pillar in your life. Like it might not be a serious relationship, but kind of reassessing and rethinking our acquaintances. Who do we have around us? Who do we talk to on a daily basis? How do you maintain relationships? How do you maintain contact with people? How do you maintain harmony with people? You might be rethinking like the good, the bad. What was a positive relationship in your past? What was a negative relationship in your past? And how can you kind of use the knowledge and wisdom you gain from those experiences to create more productive relationships for yourself in the future? And so when it comes to that topic of reconciliation, meeting up with your ex, meeting up with old friends, I feel like that can actually be kind of positive for some people, where sometimes if you just have a conversation with someone from your past and kind of revisit what your consciousness was with that person and how you acted in that relationship, having that conversation can be so valuable and priceless with learning how to navigate your own relationships in the future. That brings us to number 4, which has to do with boundaries. So another part of the Libra archetype that I feel like might not get talked about as much is boundaries, boundary setting. Libra represents the 7th house in our charts. 7th house is about boundaries and relationships we just talked about. So there's obviously a direct link to boundaries, relationships, and how we kind of navigate that. And so that's kind of like the main topic here is like boundary setting and how do we set boundaries with other people? How do we set boundaries in our mind? I feel like that's huge too, since we're on this topic of mental health, is like, how do you tell yourself no? How do you discipline yourself mentally? How do you create a routine for yourself and stick to that? So creating those mental boundaries, I feel like, is also really relevant during this retrograde, and we might feel the need to kind of reassert those mental boundaries in our minds, and with the ultimate purpose of creating a more productive lifestyle for ourselves, and seeing those external benefits of having a mind that has consistent boundaries in it. And that brings us to number 5, which is decluttering. So we get the whole vibe of retrograde is looking back at the past. And we might be feeling the need to declutter our minds. I feel like there's a huge mental component with this retrograde, of course, like we've been talking about, but also decluttering our space. And there is like that thing where like your space is directly connected to your mind, and like how you organize your space is connected to your mental health. So it kind of all loops together here. So we really get that opportunity to really rethink what we want in our lives, rethink the items we want, rethink what's in our closet, our wardrobe. We're still talking about Libra here, so aesthetics is relevant. So maybe like decluttering your makeup collection, your hair stuff, or just anything you have that's excessive. Maybe you want to get rid of it, give it away, sell it, depop it, etc. And then mentally you might be taking inventory of like, okay, here's this thought pattern, this habit, this way of thinking that I want to declutter from my mind, declutter negative thoughts. So decluttering and cleaning up our space mentally and physically is a huge theme with this retrograde too. So quickly, let's talk about the favorable activities and then the unfavorable activities. And then we'll get to the fun part after that. So favorable activities, generally speaking, kind of involve grounding activities. I think I touched on that earlier, but like grounding yourself in your space, grounding yourself in your body, doing like yoga, meditation, walking around, dancing, singing, anything that kind of puts you like in your physical body kind of helps you during this time, since you might feel a little bit mentally confused or indecisive. Grounding yourself in spiritual practice or just routine in general can help you during this time and can be considered a favorable activity. And so that brings us to unfavorable activities. Now, with unfavorable activities, I don't like to say like, hey, don't do this, or hey, this is wrong for retrograde, but there's just some things that are just simply kind of unfavorable because the energy is not working in your favor during retrograde for that activity. So generally speaking, I feel like it's not good to do things that you want to last. So if you do something and it's something you want to be permanent, let's say like a job or like a relationship, something that's more serious in your life, and you want that thing to last for a long time, I feel like if you start it in retrograde, it doesn't have a good start. And I feel like you need a good start energetically and like foundationally to start some sort of project, start some sort of relationship. So doing temporary things might be good during this time, or reassessing things, but doing something you want to be permanent for the long term might not be good during this like 3-week chunk. One kind of shortcut I noticed about retrograde when it comes to like unfavorable activities is that if you started something before the retrograde and then you finish it in retrograde, then I think it's fine. If something has already been a plan, it's been in fruition before retrograde even started, and then you just happen to finish it or put the final seal on it or sign something to complete something you already started previously, then I think it's just like fine because you started it when retrograde wasn't happening, hopefully. But if you start that thing in retrograde, then that's when the foundation of it isn't strong enough to exist for the long term. So now for the fun fact part of this video. When I was looking for the dates for Mercury retrograde, Libra, like the calendar, all that stuff, I found out that the last time that Mercury is retrograde in Libra was 2015. And so what does it have to do with all of this? During retrograde, you might have more memories come up for you from 2015, and especially like the same time period in 2015. So kind of think back to like what was your life in 2015, what was like the memories you had. You can feel really nostalgic about 2015 specifically during this retrograde, which I thought was really interesting. And so comment down below and tell us like what was one of your favorite memories from 2015, maybe like favorite song, favorite movie, anything from 2015 that makes you like nostalgic. Tell us in the comments. And if you guys want your personalized prediction, that's up on Patreon. And leave your comment down below about your nostalgic memory. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video where we'll do the October predictions.